Have you ever sat in that heavy silence at a family dinner? Here on Women's Life Stories, we retell those moments, honest, everyday, sometimes controversial. Every story is a mirror. Subscribe, join the conversation, and maybe find a little healing. The rain had been working the gutter since before dusk, a steady clatter like a metronome, no one invited, but everyone eventually obeys. I set 2 plates on the oak table out of habit, then paused, realizing I'd polished the same fork twice. The Coltrane record I dropped onto the turntable hissed through a quiet passage saxophone, wandering the way memory wanders when there's no one here to tell it to behave. Steam rose from the mug I'd poured too full. Coffee, not tea, black, no sugar. On the counter, my sourdough starter burped a little under its rubber band, a glass jar fogging at the edges. I'd named it Grace years ago, not for piety, but for persistence. You feed it, it feeds you. Simple math. Most things in this house used to be. My phone buzzed against the butcher block top, a single vibration abrupt enough to slice the room in half. Mom, tonight's just friends only Daniel's idea. We'll do Sunday with you. Love you. The message tried to soften itself on the way in. Friends only Daniel's idea, love you. I read it twice. The second time was slower, like stepping back from a painting until the colors sharpen into what they really are. I put the phone screen down and steadied the mug with both hands. The rain ticked louder, 1,000 small knuckles on the eaves. It wasn't the first time my daughter Brooke pared a table down without me, but tonight it felt different, like being erased with a brand new pink eraser, neat, efficient, no smudge left to argue with later. I stared at the second plate until its gloss dulled beneath the kitchen light. Coltrane slid into the next track. The needle found a groove I'd worn 100 times in other winters, the saxophone shouldering the melody with a patience I didn't remember having. I carried the second plate back to the cupboard, returned to the table, and pretended that the chair across from me was simply decorative. The house settled, the kind of exhale old houses do when they realize no one is going to slam a door. Another buzz, 3 dots, then nothing. People think silence is empty. It's not. It is crowded with everything you won't say out loud. I lifted the phone again, not to read, just to feel the weight. Brooke's contact photo from a July we liked each other more hovered at the top, her hair sunlit, her grin untamed. She used to sit right where the empty chair was, claiming half my toast and all my attention. I carried the coffee to the window. Out on Cedar Street, headlights washed the wet pavement a cheap gold. Across from me, the Morales porch light flickered to life. Bernice always timed it right before the street went fully dark. In the reflection, the kitchen floated behind me, the jar labeled Grace. A blue dish towel folded into precise thirds. A grocery list clipped by a magnet that used to hold school pictures and now holds coupons I never use. The hallway photos could have used dusting, but I reached for them anyway. Brooke at 17, chin tilted like a dare. Brooke in a cap and gown gripping my hand as if I were the diploma. One frame down, June at 10 at an art fair, shyly guarding a watercolor sun that looked like it was trying not to start a fire. Another frame, a family shot at the Sun Valley Chalet. Brooke and Daniel were always so proud to pronounce. I was behind the camera that day. I remember the mountain light looking clean enough to drink. I set the frames back, wiped my fingertips on my jeans, and listened. The rain had shifted to a steadier pour, a sound like beads spilled across tile. The record crackled. The needle faltered at a scratch I kept meaning to repair and kept failing to. Somewhere in the neighbor's yard, a dog huffed in protest, and then thought better of it. My father used to say you can tell a lot about a home by how it sounds when nobody's talking. I carried my notebook to the table. It was leather and too nice for grocery math, which is why I used it only when my hands needed something firm. I didn't write sentences, no speeches, no promises, no tidy morals I would regret later. I wrote the date in one corner and then a single word in the center of the page, a word I had not allowed my mouth to try enough. I said it once aloud, not to the room, but to the air between the table and the second chair that wasn't said anymore. It didn't echo. It didn't need to. Coltrane faded into the soft hiss of groove alone, that end-of-side limbo, where music has nothing left to carry and still refuses to call it a night. I lifted the tone arm and let the turntable spin empty. It made the smallest shiver of sound a metal whisper, like something being honed. The phone lit again, this time with a new photo on a family thread. Brooke standing at a marble island under pendant lights the size of planets, her smile carefully calibrated somewhere between candid and staged. Friends, giving warm-up, the caption said, a title designed to include everyone and still leave some people in the rain. Daniel's hand rested on her shoulder, not possessive, not tender, just present and useful. I felt the heat in my chest settle into something cooler, heavier, more precise. Not anger. Anger lives fast and leaves the room messy. This was a kind of clarity that doesn't apologize for arriving late. I touched the edge of the jar labeled Grace, then took the rubber band off and stirred with the handle of a wooden spoon. The starter rose to the surface and subsided, patient as tidewater. You feed it, it feeds you. Even a kitchen knows the difference between attention and appetite. I rinsed the extra fork and slid it into the drawer slow enough to hear the metal meet its neighbors. Then I turned off the overhead light and left the lamp above the sink on one small circle of yellow that made the rain look warmer than it was. The house felt the way a theater feels after the audience leaves the set still standing, the actors gone, the air holding a faint perfume of something that isn't coming back on stage. I stood there long enough for the coffee to cool, long enough to watch the gutter overflow, and then catch itself long enough for the record to coast to stillness. Somewhere deeper in the house, the heater kicked on, rattled, once found its rhythm. I slipped the notebook beneath the placemat and ran a thumb along the grain of the table my husband sanded the summer before he got sick. A good table holds, he'd said. He was right. It held meals, it held elbows, it held a line. When I finally reached for the light switch, the rain didn't argue. Outside Cedar Street shone like a ribbon pulled flat. In the dark, the word I'd written stayed where I put it. Grace bubbled behind glass. The house held its breath and then let it go. I left the lamp over the sink on, and the rest of the house dim the way a museum leaves one light for the night guard. The word I'd written enough sat where I'd tucked it under the placemat, a paperweight that didn't weigh much and somehow did. The rain kept stitching the dark to the windows. I rinsed the coffee mug and filled the kettle not because I wanted more, but because motion kept the room from turning into a photograph. The bottom drawer of the buffet stuck the way it always did. One of those small resistances that lets you know you still live with wood and not with plastic. Inside were file folders in my handwriting, taxes, insurance, schoolhouse. The thickest one was labeled simply family. I carried it to the table and laid everything out like a dealer cutting cards, receipts folded into thirds, printed transfers with routing numbers I could recite but had never said out loud, a glossy brochure for a place in Idaho Ridgeline Chalet, the kind of name you pronounce with your shoulders back. The kettle clicked off. Steam lifted in a soft column, fogging the window above the sink. I brought the mug back without sugar and sipped while the laptop woke. Passwords are small autobiographies. Mine read like a person who once relied more on dates than on instincts. The Cascade Mutual site took its time, the circle turning as if it had an interest in suspense. When the dashboard finally loaded, the page lit up with a neat procession of numbers wearing their Sunday best. Scheduled payments sat in a list on the left, so tidy you'd think they dusted themselves. I scrolled. Mortgage, Ridgeline Chalet LLC. Utilities, Ridge, County Energy. HOA dues. Insurance. Property management. Cleaning service. A line item for guest maintenance that I didn't remember agreeing to at all. Dates marched month after month, a calendar, with the answers already penciled in. I counted out loud without meaning to. The tally reached 162 before the page ran out of scroll. The number didn't shock me. The shape of it did. Love is a staircase, each step the same height as the last, and me too tired to ask where it was going. The cursor sat over the first item. Cancel. It's a small word and a square button. I hovered, then took my hands off the keys and pressed my palms flat on the table, feeling where the oak had picked up stories from elbows and plates and holiday spills. My husband used to say, "Don't be dramatic with money. It doesn't deserve the ceremony." I wasn't sure whether I was being dramatic or exacting. Both felt like steadiness in this weather. I clicked. The site asked me again the way a stranger asks for your name twice to see if you flinch. Are you sure? Yes. The button changed to confirmed in a green that looked almost pastoral. A small line at the top of the page refreshed itself. One less. I stayed with the rhythm the site offered, read breathe, click until the column thinned and the page found its end. The confirmations collected in my inbox like receipts after a long day. Subject lines with the same polite tone as if the bank clerk were setting a glass of water near my elbow without looking me in the eye. The house made a contented noise at some point, a settling of joints now that there weren't so many automatic arrangements to keep. I left the laptop open and pulled the deed folder from the file like Yanni stack, not sure what I wanted to confirm because my hands already knew. The photocopy stared back, Byers, Brooke Keller, and Daniel Keller. No May Delaney in any corner. The absence had always been there, I had simply walked around it. My phone lit, a name I hadn't dialed in months, though his card had lived in my wallet for years. Adler Cascade Mutual. Not a call. The hour was rude for that. I typed an email without fuss or apology direct with account numbers requesting removal of authorizations that no longer made sense and a freeze on anything with my approval attached, where it should never have been. When I pressed send, the rain on the gutter answered like someone tapping the table to say they heard me. Grace in her glass jar breathed once, sour and warm, I fed her 2 spoonfuls of flour and a little water, watched the surface take both in without a complaint. You feed what feeds you. The equation didn't require a lawyer. Still, I needed one. Nora Patel's number lived in a small black book that smelled like leather and years. She had been a voice in the periphery after my husband died, the kind of person who never uses 3 words when 2 will do. Her office voicemail spoke like she remembered everything about paper that people forget: times, dates, where to sign, and how not to apologize for signing there. I left my name and asked for a morning slot. No explanation. She didn't need the rain part or the record part or the part where I had set 2 plates and then removed one. She'd need account titles and the name on a deed. I had those. The phone glowed again, a softer name, June. A message first: "Are you up then?" 1 ring before I answered. Night isn't the same hour for 17 as it is for 72. "Grandma, I'm here," I said. The lamp threw a small circle on the table and not enough on the walls. "I know it's late." She breathed into the phone like a runner. "Is everything... Are you okay?" Children learn the weather of a person before they learn the forecasts. "I'm fine," I said. "Working on some things." "Mom said you were tired," June said quickly, then stopped as if the words weren't hers to carry. "Sorry, it sounded like a sentence someone gave you," I said, not unkind. "How's your project?" She brightened the way you can hear a face change. "Bridge model. We have to build it from cardboard and string and see if it can hold weight. Everyone's failing because they make pretty and forget physics." "Pretty breaks first," I said. "Exactly." She exhaled and let quiet sit between us for a bar or 2. "I was going to ask if I could interview you for my family history piece, like a recorded thing, not formal. About when you moved to Tacoma with Grandpa and the way you plan things." She laughed at herself. "That sounds boring when I say it. It sounds like you want to hear how someone held something," I said. "Yes." The Cascade Mutual site pinged politely with another confirmation. June heard it. "Are you working?" "Tidying," I said. "The kind that doesn't involve a broom." "That's the worst kind." She yawned. "I could come by this weekend." "If you want," I said. The rain pulled a stitch at the corner of the eaves. "Bring your bridge." She laughed again, softer. "Okay, I will." After we hung up, the house felt less like an exhibit and more like a room someone still used. I stacked the printed confirmations in one pile and the old receipts in another. The brochures went back in the folder without the air of a promise. I drew a clean sheet from the notebook and wrote names the way attorneys do, one beneath the other. Living Trust Primary, May Delaney. Successor, Nora Patel, Beneficiary, June Keller, age 25. I added a line below without thinking. Delaney Grace Fund, small scholarships for kids who need $20 more than they have. I circled the word Grace before the ink could dry. When the kettle coughed again, I poured hot water over the old grounds. The second cup tasted harsher. The night does that. It makes the same recipe come back with more edge. I stood at the sink and watched the street. Cedar had emptied out. Even Bernice across the way had turned her porch light off. The gutter had slowed to drip, spaced like commas. The email chimed Adler answering from a late desk. His note was all bones and no fat. He'd placed temporary holds where permissible queued authorization removals for my signature in the morning and attached PDFs with lines conveniently flagged. He thanked me for the clarity of my instructions. Bankers appreciate a person who has stopped clearing their throat. I printed the forms and laid them beside the folder labeled Family. The printer, surprised to be needed, produced each page with a smug little whir. The stack warmed my fingers when I touched it. Paper is more alive than a screen. It remembers creases and coffee. It makes a sound when you put it down. The record player still sat open-mouthed on the credenza. I lifted the arm and gave the turntable a gentle spin. The platter hummed without song, a small lathe shaving the night into thinner pieces. I thought of Brooke's message again and the way she had loaned her reason to someone who liked being in charge of reasons. I thought of the photo at the Marble Island and the light that makes kitchens look like magazines, and people look like they're not waiting for anything. I signed the Adler forms with my full name. The pen's weight felt right in my hand. Sometimes your own handwriting looks like a stranger's if you haven't asked it for anything in a while. This looked like mine. I pressed the sheets flat with the side of my palm and found a large envelope in the junk drawer that for once held something useful. Before I turned the lamp off, I wrote one more word beneath enough. Stop. Not in anger. In ink. I didn't need it to sound like a speech. I needed it to look like a signature. The house received the dark without complaint. Rain became a kind of static. Grace rose in her jar and then settled. The heater smoothed out its throat and worked. The table held. The drawer slid shut the first try. And in the next room, the printer cooled with tiny ticks that sounded like cheerleading from a polite distance. Morning came in a thinner rain, the kind that strings itself between roof lines and hangs there like thread you could snap with 2 fingers. The envelope to Cascade Mutual sat by the door with its fat corner of forms, my full name signed in a hand I recognized. I set it upright against the umbrella stand and made coffee that tasted like the middle of the night. Across the street, Bernice's porch light blinked off with the certainty of a habit that didn't ask permission. The neighborhood was a matte gray. Cedar Street ran flat as a ruler. I fed Grace 2 spoonfuls of flour, the jar fogging as if it were thinking, and left the lid loose. The house felt busy without anyone moving. A knock came like someone tapping a polite rhythm. Bernice didn't wait for me to invite her. She edged in with a Dutch oven wrapped in a towel. Chili, she said. Rain day medicine, or court day. Works for both. No court, I said. Not today. Good. She put the pot on the stove and looked around, taking inventory without touching. You look like you filed a small city. Just the parts that were pretending to be mine. She nodded at the envelope. That going today, as soon as the mail comes. She uncovered the pot. Steam rose dense and cumin warm. Don't confuse feeding people with feeding a problem, she said as if she were reading a recipe card. One of those grows, the other one doesn't. I'm learning the difference, I said. She ladled a bowl, set it on the counter, and pressed my wrist once with her fingers warm and ringless. If she shows up, don't let her do the voice. What voice? The one where grown daughters sound like guidance counselors. She smiled to make it lighter. It's the sound of somebody borrowing concern to pay off a bill. She left with a wink and a promise to take the pot back when righteousness cools. The house quieted, Chili perfuming the kitchen like a kind of patience I hadn't earned yet. A mail truck coughed at the corner. I slipped the envelope into the box, raised the red flag, and felt the smallest click under my fingers, the hinge doing its job without applause. By late morning, a car I knew even from its reflection in the window pulled to the curb. Brooke stepped out in a trench coat that pretended not to notice it was raining. She didn't ring. She knocked in a rhythm I had set for her years ago, a 3-beat that used to mean I forgot my key. Mom, she said when I opened the door. Her hair was pinned into something tidy. Her smile looked kind. It always did. Brooke, I said. She glanced past me into the house. Can I come in? You're already halfway there, I said and stepped aside. She took the room in with the small, quick sweep of a realtor, which she was even with her hands empty. Her eyes paused on the folders on the printer on the pot of chili. You cooked, she said, as if that were a surprise. Bernice did. Of course. She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear that didn't need tucking. Mom, I feel like last night got misinterpreted. I crossed to the counter and set 2 bowls, then thought better of it and put one back. Did it. Daniel thought a friends-only thing would be simpler. Less tension. She softened the corners of her voice like a good hostess. I should have phrased it better. You phrased it exactly how you meant it, I said, not unkind. Clear as merciful. Her mouth tightened and then smoothed the way you iron a shirt while it's still on the hanger. That's not fair. Fair as a ledger, I said. I'm talking about a door. Some doors are open, some closed. You sent me a closed one. She stood very straight. Maybe we all need a little space. We've all been under a lot of pressure. We all doesn't mean what you think it means, I said. Pressure is paying for a thing you don't own while being told you're lucky to be allowed to pay. Color lifted in her face. She looked at the table at my notebook, half tucked under the placemat. You've been organizing. Tidying, I said, the kind without a broom. She laughed without humor. Daniel said the bank called. Something about authorizations. They did, I said. I took my name back from some things that were acting like they didn't need it. That's not how any of this works, she said thin. You can't just... I can, I said, and lets the sentence end there. Her eyes glossed with the particular shine of someone rushing to stay composed. Mom, please don't make this emotional. I haven't cried, I said. You haven't apologized. We're both doing something new. Apologize for what she asked too quickly and heard it herself. She looked away. The rain made a clean sound on the gutter, unbothered by our volume. You signed forms you didn't read, I said. You let someone who likes paper more than people stack it under my name. That's not true, she said, but the sentence broke in the middle. Daniel handles logistics. He's good at it. Good at it, I repeated, as if trying a spice I wasn't sure about. Do you want chili? She shook her head, then nodded because saying no to soup is hard in a kitchen like this. I set a bowl down. She didn't touch it. I did. I can fix this, she said after a while. She said it like she was staging a room. It's not a listing, I said. It isn't waiting for an offer. She pulled in a breath and let it out through her nose. You're being dramatic. Probably, I said. It suits the weather. She put both hands flat on the table as if pressing the day into place. Tell me what you need. I already told the bank, I said. I'll tell my lawyer. Her eyebrows lifted. You got a lawyer? I called my lawyer. I corrected it because the difference was the point. She stood so fast the chair foot touched down hard. Daniel should be here for this. Then he will be, I said. She left without hugging me and without slamming the door. The air she took with her made the room larger. I ate the rest of her chili standing up at the counter, the way you eat when you're trying not to abandon the place you're standing. Around 4, the rain took a breath and went from pencil lines to pinpoints. A black SUV idled at the curb until it decided it was a visitor. Daniel didn't knock in any remembered rhythm. He knocked like a man testing a wall. "May," he said, using my first name, the way salesmen use a cologne that lingers in the doorway after they've stepped back. "Daniel," I said. He stayed on the threshold 1 second longer than polite and then stepped in, bringing a smell like something expensive and sharp. His coat looked like it knew the price of itself. He held his hands open, empty and precise. "I'm here to clear the air." "The air is wet, not dirty," I said. "What do you want cleared?" He smiled in the way that puts light on the teeth and shadow on the eyes. "Brooke's upset. Understandably. You've made some abrupt decisions." "I made some delayed ones," I said. "Abrupt would have been years ago." He looked at the printer at the stacked forms. "It's not constructive to freeze payments without talking to the people they affect. The payments affected the person who made them," I said. "We're talking now." "You know the chalet is a shared asset," he said. "We all benefit, you included." "I've never slept there," I said. "That's not the point," he said gently, as if the room might bruise. "Family assets have interdependencies. You can't tug one thread and not expect—" "Threads get cut," I said. "That's one way to stop fraying." He set both hands on the back of a chair. His ring clicked once against the wood. "May, you trusted me with logistics because you know I'm responsible. Let me be responsible." "I trusted my daughter," I said. "You were adjacent to that trust." He blinked and the smile cooled a degree. "The bank mentioned authorizations you're removing." "I removed what never should have used my name," I said. "If you need a word for it, call it returning." He laughed softly. "You don't understand how these structures work. We've built something here." "You've decorated something here," I said. "There's a difference." The rain stitched the window with such patience it sounded like a demonstration. He glanced at it as if the weather might file a complaint. "Be careful," he said, no smile now. "You're implying things." "I'm confirming them," I said. "If you want to call Mr. Adler and confirm them with him, please do. He prefers email." Something set in his jaw. This could get messy. "It already is," I said. "There's chili if you're hungry." He looked at the pot like it might be an insult. "We're reasonable people. We can find a solution that doesn't embarrass anyone." "I'm not embarrassed," I said. "I'm at my kitchen table." He paced once, the soft soles of his shoes making a sound like a decision you don't confess. "Brooke is trying to hold a lot. She can put some of it down." He stopped, leaned in, and dropped his voice a register. "Are you sure you want to do this?" "Yes," I said. The word had the weight of my notebook under the placemat. He held my gaze long enough to count to 3 if I'd wanted to. Then he straightened. "You'll hear from me," he said, as if I'd ordered something and he was setting a delivery window. "I have a lawyer," I said, not louder, not softer. He nodded once, a short bow to a fact he didn't like, and went out. The SUV idled again, then moved off, a black punctuation mark going silent at the corner. I stood in the doorway until the engine sound dissolved into the rain. The room felt like it had been made level. I washed the bowls, stacked them mouth to dry, and wiped the counter where someone's hand had rested without an invitation. I turned the lamp over the sink a little lower. The printer's plastic ticked as it cooled. I texted Nora a sentence without ornaments. "I'm ready. Quiet paper first." Then I put the phone face down next to the notebook. Grace bubbled and settled. The gutter kept its time. The house, which had learned too many ways to brace for company, relearned itself in the softer work of holding its own. By the time the clouds broke enough to show blue, we were already past Twin Falls, the road climbing in dry switchbacks that made the hills look pinned to the horizon. Nora drove because she liked to keep her hands on the day. I kept mine in my lap with a manila folder balanced like a tray. The heater pushed a steady, quiet warmth that asked nothing. We didn't talk much. You don't narrate a bridge while you're on it. Sun Valley revealed itself the way resort towns do. Cedar and glass snow lingering in the shade like an afterthought, SUVs with plates from 4 states lined up as if they'd been called to attendance. The chalet sat back from the road with its eaves kicked out and its face lifted toward the slope. I had seen it 100 times in photos lit to flatter. In November light, it looked more honest, handsome, yes, but busy trying. Nora parked where someone had set river stones into an arrangement that meant to say both wild and curated. "Ready?" she asked, not to test, but to locate. "I'm already here," I said. Inside smelled like polished wood and something citrus. A gas fire purred behind glass. The kitchen on the right wore its marble like a declarative sentence. The island was wide enough to divide a family without anyone having to raise a voice. Brooke stood from a low chair near the fireplace, smoothing her coat down, the way a person smooths words before saying them. Daniel rose from the sofa with the posture of someone who has rehearsed authority in reflective surfaces. "Mom," Brooke said. "Thank you for coming." "Nora," Daniel added, offering a hand he expected to be taken. "Appreciate you making time." Nora shook it once. She didn't set her briefcase down. June sat in the corner by the window, a sketchbook on her knees, legs folded under her like she was trying to be smaller than she was. She looked at me, not asking. I nodded once, just enough to say, "You're not in trouble for being here. We wanted to clear up the confusion." Daniel began, palms open. "There's been some movement with accounts. We figured face-to-face is better than—" "Confusion is a strong word for things that have invoices," Nora said evenly. She stepped to the edge of the coffee table, clicked the briefcase open, and set a slim stack down. "Let's agree on scope. We'll discuss scheduled payments previously drawn from my clients' accounts, the removal of certain authorizations, and the current status of title holdings. We are not here to litigate feelings." Brooke winced the smallest flinch. "No one's litigating," she said. This is family." "That's why we're here," I said. Daniel gestured toward the kitchen. "Can I get anyone a drink?" "No," Nora and I said together. He smiled to cover the echo. "All right then." We sat. The sofa gave too much under me, the way expensive furniture sometimes does, when it's designed to make you feel poured into. I set my folder in my lap and kept a hand on it as if it might try to go somewhere. "First," Nora said, sliding a page free. "Effective as of this morning, all recurring transfers tied to Ridgeline Chalet LLC, Ridge County. Energy North Basin HOA and related service vendors were canceled by the account owner. Confirmation receipts are attached." Daniel's jaw acknowledged that he had read his email. "Abrupt," he said mildly. "That's all I'll say. It isn't abrupt to stop doing a thing you never agreed to be required to do." Nora returned. Brooke leaned forward. "We've all benefited. The chalet is for everyone. Family holidays guests. You've always been welcome." "I've never slept here," I said. "I've never been invited for a night." "That's not—" She started, then stopped because June made the smallest sound, like a pencil turning in her hand. Nora lifted the next sheet. Second authorizations. There were forms on file at Cascade Mutual allowing third-party initiation of certain payments. Those have been revoked. Fresh signature cards and a restricted transfer letter are in effect. Daniel's smile stayed on, but it lost teeth. "We were managing logistics. She asked us to help. Life gets complicated. Someone has to carry the boring parts." I took the lid off my folder and fanned out copies of the receipts, not to count, not to shame. Paper makes its own argument when it breathes. "I carried the boring parts," I said, "for a long time." Brooke's eyes shone not with tears, but with the effort of keeping a room intact. "Mom, I should have told you we were under pressure. The market turned. The optics mattered." Daniel said consistency is the only way to appear stable, I said. "Yes, I've met optics." The fire made a small, obliging sound. A skier laughed outside and then was gone. "Third," Nora said. Title. The deed lists Brooke and Daniel as owners of record. There is no notation of my client on that instrument. She placed a photocopy on the table and touched the corner, not as a threat, as a locating pin. Daniel exhaled and spread his hands. "Of course. You gave the down payment as a gift, May. We discussed that. Everyone was clear. You said yourself you didn't want responsibility only to make your life easier," I said. I didn't add the next sentence because it would have been a speech and not a fact. Brooke stared at the deed as if the paper had gotten the story wrong on purpose. "We've always said it was ours, yes, but yours too in a way that never required keys," I said. June shifted her weight, the sketchbook strap pulling against her wrist. She looked down quickly when Brooke glanced over the family choreography sliding into place without anyone calling it. "Fourth," Nora said, drawing a thin document from the stack with 2 fingers as if she were showing a card and not a blade. "We've executed a living trust. It consolidates assets under my client's control with a named successor trustee. Beneficiary designation is also updated. I'm not here to perform drama. The paperwork exists. It does what it does." Daniel opened his mouth and closed it. He tried a different door. "This feels punitive." "It isn't a feeling," Nora said. "It's structure." Brooke looked at me the way a person looks at a shore they had always assumed would hold. "You could have called me." "I did," I said in a voice I'd forgotten I had. "Your phone was busy being a stage." Her lip trembled, not the dramatic kind, the exhausted kind. "I didn't know you felt edited out." "I didn't feel," I said. I read the line. Silence shaped itself. Papers rustled in a way that registered as weather. I slid out one last set of pages, not all 162, just enough to be a shape someone could understand. I didn't count. I arranged months, fanning like shingles. "It looks like generosity," I said. "It behaves like obligation. I let it because I thought that was love. That's my part. The rest, the part where I'm asked to keep signing, stops." Daniel reached for a page and then thought better of touching it. He leaned back and crossed one ankle over a knee, a pose that says we are still in control even when gravity disagrees. "You know how this reads, right? To other people, it reads like you're turning your back." "I live in my house," I said. "Other people don't." Nora closed her folder to indicate the segment had reached a natural edge. "We're done today when we stand up," she said. "There's nothing to negotiate." Brooke swallowed. "So that's it?" "That's what you heard," I said. I'm telling you what I did. She nodded once, a movement so small it could have been a leaf, finding a place to rest. Her gaze slid to June, then back to me, as if the shortest path between 2 points might not be a straight line after all. June, sweetheart, could you wait for me outside a minute? June didn't move. I'm okay here, she said. Voice gentle, the way you talk to an injured bird without reaching for it. No one answered. The room settled into its bones. Daniel lifted his hands and let them fall to his knees. This will ripple, he said, the way men talk about markets when they mean people. Everything ripples, Nora said. The difference here is that the drop was intentional. I stood because my body was ready before my mind admitted it. The chair gave back a sigh. I gathered the receipts into a square, slid them into the folder, pressed the edges with my palm until the stack behaved like one thing. I didn't offer to leave copies. Email had already delivered what needed delivering. Paper had done its work as a living object. At the door, I paused long enough to look at the kitchen, as it really was not the island from photos, not the pendants like planets, just a counter with a fruit bowl that didn't smell like fruit. I turned the knob. The cold came in as if it had been waiting politely. Nora fell in step with me without asking which way we were going. On the path, the river stones held their arrangement, doing their best version of nature. Tires hissed on the road beyond the hedge. A raven flew low, black on white, making no commentary. May Brooke called from the threshold, the one word without a sentence built around it. I looked, but I didn't turn back into the house. She wasn't crying. I wasn't either. Drive safe, she said. Nora unlocked the car. The heater woke with its small animal hum. I buckled the folder into the passenger seat with me because it had become for the moment a person I was responsible for. The chalet's windows reflected sky in our car and the idea of a family standing in a room. You can't see through glass that bright from the outside. We pulled away with a noise softer than leaving usually makes. The slope kept its snow. The eaves kept their angle. Behind us, a house lit for company continued to hum to itself, all the lights on, doing what houses do when they're full of objects that can't argue. We didn't speak much on the drive back. The heater kept pace. The lines on the highway slid by like someone pulling thread through cloth. When Nora dropped me at the curb on Cedar, the rain had softened to a mist that didn't bother deciding whether it was weather. Bernice's porch light flicked on as if to mark my return. Inside, the house smelled like cumin from the pot she'd left, and like paper from the folder I set on the table. Grace rose and settled in her jar as if nothing in the world had changed. Morning found the phone quicker than I did. Missed calls, voicemails with too many polite words. Nora's message was the only one that kept its coat on. They've filed to contest the account changes. Meet at Cascade Mutual at 2. I made coffee and signed where she'd flagged. The printer purred like it had been waiting for the excuse. The conference room at the bank had glass walls and a view of parking lot and fir trees, the kind corporate architects give to people who sign things. A clerk read from a packet with the careful neutrality of someone filing calendar pages back into a book. Daniel sat straight-backed, hands folded into a shape that looked like certainty from across a room. Brooke sat smaller than yesterday, eyes on the table's oak grain as if it might tell her where to place her hands. Allegations of undue influence, the clerk read, and questions of competency at time of signature. Nora's folder opened with a sound like a hinge that had been oiled. Responses attached, she said. Account owner initiated changes herself. Timestamped logins from her device. Mr. Adler's affidavit. And here, she slid a printout forward. Third-party authorization filed 6 months ago, not by my client. Handwriting analysis included. It does not match hers. Daniel's face didn't change so much as tighten at the edges, a drawing shaded a little too hard near the lines. He said nothing. Brooke looked at the printout, then at him, and flinched without moving. The clerk nodded, processed, stacked, and restacked. If the petitioners wish to continue, the bank will refer the authorization document to counsel. No one wanted that sentence on paper. Daniel reached for his pen and then set it down to show he didn't need it. We withdraw, he said. The words came out careful, like stepping off a curb you hadn't seen. The signatures were quick. Paper remembered the corners of each page when they turned. Nora closed her folder and breathed out through her nose in a way that didn't announce victory. Outside, the air had the clean scrubbed smell that follows hard rain. People moved across the lot holding their own errands up against their chests. Back home, I left my coat on the chair, set the folder in the drawer labeled family, and fed Grace because habit is its own kind of weather. A text arrived from a number I didn't save under a name, though I knew who it was. I signed the withdrawal. I told him to go. I'm sorry. Another message followed before I could answer a link to a listing. Ridgeline Chalet, Sun Valley, 3 bedrooms, winter light staged across the floors. Contact Brooke Keller and Rowe. I didn't click anything else. I replied with 4 words that didn't try to be more than they were. Take care of yourself. Days arranged themselves. The mail arrived with its procession of envelopes addressed to the person I had been and a few finally addressed to the one I was. Bernice returned the Dutch oven clean and left a note clipped to the handle, "Don't call peace what you haven't cooked yourself." I set the pot on the stove and left it empty, the promise of heat enough for the moment. June came by with a cardboard truss bridge that held more weight than it looked like it should. We set it on the kitchen table and hung a grocery bag of flour from the center with string. The bridge sagged and then decided not to break. She grinned the way she did when she was 5 and had convinced a kite to climb. From her backpack, she pulled a sketch for me, Cedar Street after rain, the gutter a line of silver, the small square of light from my sink lamp, like a punctuation mark that doesn't need a sentence. A week later, an envelope addressed in Brooke's unmistakable realtor's block sat in my mailbox. Inside, a single line in her handwriting on a torn page. Started at the city library part-time. Feels good to shelve things I didn't buy. Nothing else. No apology stamped in the corner. I set the note under the magnet where school pictures used to go and let it hold. Winter slid forward without flares. The trust documents came back from the registry with their stamps. The sound of the envelope tearing open was small and merciful. I filed them, checked the latch on the drawer, and left the house dark except for the lamp over the sink. Bernice knocked sometimes and didn't come in, just tapped the glass with 2 fingers like a bird testing its reflection, then walked on. Nora sent 2 emails in a row that contained only receipts. I answered with thank yous that didn't try to be anything but accurate. Spring showed up first in the gutters where the moss brightened, and then on the small cherry by the curb that always bloomed a week late. The kitchen window learned a new light. June's message came on a Saturday morning while the kettle argued its way to a boil. Scholarship came through. Architecture. I'm keeping the bridge. I stood at the counter with the phone in my hand until the kettle spit itself quiet. Then I put the phone down and poured. By June, New Mexico. June dry and forgiving, I was turning clay in a studio with windows big enough to call sky a wall. Bernice had a wheel 2 stations over and swore at lumps as if they could hear. The instructor spoke in verbs. Throw, center, pull. Sometimes the pot failed and collapsed like a breath you couldn't finish. Sometimes it held a shape that surprised your hands. My fingers learned what pressure belonged where. You don't convince clay, you remember to meet it. A postcard arrived from Idaho smudged with travel and heat. June's drawing covered the back, a wooden footbridge over a narrow run of water, 2 figures crossing in opposite directions without touching shoulders. On the blank space below, she'd written, "I'll visit when studio ends. Bring bread." I turned the card over again. On the front sky so blue it looked like a plan. I put the postcard on the sill above the sink lamp and left it there without commentary. At night, the desert cooled enough to make the day feel like a story someone told and then put away. In the rental's kitchen, a different jar of starter and a different light breathed at a different rhythm and answered to the same name. I stirred, fed, covered. The lid clicked into place, an ordinary sound that does not ask for witness. The road outside the window held still. The room did too. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story.